The small coffee shop on the edge of Santa Monica was alive with the hum of early morning chatter. Baristas called out orders over the hiss of steaming milk, and the scent of roasted beans hung thick in the air. Outside, the Pacific breeze rustled the palm trees, carrying the faint sound of waves crashing a block away. Amid the bustle, one man sat alone at a corner table near the window, his presence almost invisible to the crowd. He wore a faded gray hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of scuffed boots that looked like they'd walked 1,000 miles. No one seemed to notice him, and he liked it that way. It was Keanu Reeves. On the table in front of him sat a simple black coffee, steam curling lazily from the mug. His hands rested lightly around it, not drinking, just holding the warmth. Around his neck, barely visible beneath the hoodie, hung a thin leather cord with a small wooden pendant carved into the shape of a wave. It wasn't flashy or ornate, just a quiet piece that seemed to carry a story in its worn edges. Keanu gazed out the window, watching the world move by, his expression calm but distant, like someone lost in a memory the ocean might understand. The shop was busy, but not chaotic. Locals shuffled in and out, some grabbing to-go cups, others settling into chairs with laptops or newspapers. At the counter, Carla, the head barista, worked with practiced efficiency. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her apron was spotless, despite the morning rush. She had a sharp eye and a sharper tongue, known for keeping the place running like clockwork. She'd seen her share of customers, from chatty regulars to entitled tourists, and she prided herself on reading people before they even opened their mouths. Today, though, something felt off. Her gaze kept drifting to the man in the corner. Carla didn't recognize him at first. He wasn't loud or demanding, didn't wave her over or complain about the wait, like some of the wealthier patrons who breezed in from the beachfront condos. But there was something about him, something that didn't fit the usual rhythm of the shop. Maybe it was the way he sat so still, or the pendant that peeked out when he shifted to adjust his hood. She squinted, trying to place him, then shook it off. Probably just another drifter passing through, she thought. Still, her curiosity gnawed at her. The bell above the door jingled as Nicole, the younger barista, hurried in, tying her apron as she went. She was late again, her cheeks flushed from the run down the boardwalk. "Sorry, Carla," she muttered, slipping behind the counter. "Bike chain snapped halfway here." Carla rolled her eyes but said nothing, handing her a tray of pastries to restock. Nicole glanced around, catching her breath, and noticed Keanu too. "Who's that guy?" she whispered, nodding toward the corner. Carla shrugged, wiping her hands on a towel. "No idea. Been sitting there forever with that one coffee, probably waiting for someone." Nicole tilted her head, studying him. "He looks familiar, like really familiar." Carla snorted. "You say that about every guy with a hoodie. Get moving, we've got a line." But as Nicole started stacking croissants, Carla's eyes flicked back to Keanu. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just sat there with that pendant catching the light every so often. It wasn't religious or political, nothing obvious, but it bothered her for reasons she couldn't pin down. Maybe it was the way he wore it, so unapologetic, like it meant more than anyone could guess. The morning wore on, and the crowd thinned out. Keanu stayed put, his coffee long gone cold. Carla decided she'd had enough of the mystery. She grabbed a fresh pot and walked over, her steps clipped and purposeful. "Refill?" she asked, her tone polite, but edged with something sharper. Keanu looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers, and gave a small nod. "Sure, thanks." His voice was low, almost too soft for the room, but it carried a weight that made her pause. As she poured, her gaze landed on the pendant again, now fully visible against his chest. "What's that?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Keanu touched the wooden wave lightly, his fingers brushing the grain. "Just something I've had a while," he said, offering nothing more. Carla frowned, setting the pot down on the table a little harder than necessary. "Looks old. You a surfer or something?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't answer anything. "Not really, it's more of a reminder." Her brow furrowed. "Reminder of what?" He didn't reply right away, just looked at her with that steady, unreadable calm. Carla straightened, crossing her arms. "You've been here 3 hours with one coffee. People usually don't linger unless they're up to something." It wasn't an accusation, not yet, but it hung in the air like one. Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Just enjoying the view," he said, nodding toward the window. She followed his gaze to the ocean beyond, then back to him, unconvinced. Right, well, we're not a lounge. If you're done, maybe it's time to move on. Her words were firm, a barista's version of asserting control, but they didn't land the way she expected. Keanu didn't argue or bristle. He just looked at her, then down at the pendant, and said, "This kept me going when I didn't think I could. I don't wear it to bother anyone." His voice stayed even, but there was a quiet strength in it that made the room feel smaller. Carla blinked, caught off guard. She hadn't expected that. Before she could respond, Nicole appeared at her side, holding a tray of empty mugs. "Carla, chill," she whispered. "He's not hurting anyone." But Carla's jaw tightened. Something about his calm, his refusal to explain, sparked a flicker of irritation she couldn't shake. She turned back to him, her tone clipped. "Look, I don't care what it means to you. This is my shop, my rules. If you're not ordering more, you're loitering." Keanu met her eyes again, unflinching. "I'll take another coffee then," he said simply. She stared at him, the challenge unspoken but electric. Nicole shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension building. Outside, the waves rolled on, indifferent to the storm brewing in the corner of the shop. The coffee shop settled into a quieter rhythm as the late morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The initial rush had faded, leaving only a handful of customers scattered at tables, their conversations a low murmur against the clink of cups. Keanu remained in his corner by the window, a fresh mug of coffee steaming in front of him. He hadn't touched it yet, his hands resting loosely on the table, the wooden wave pendant still hanging against his chest. Outside, the ocean glittered under the light, a restless expanse that seemed to mirror the unease growing inside the shop. Carla stood behind the counter, wiping it down with more force than necessary. Her eyes kept darting to Keanu, each glance sharpening the knot in her stomach. She didn't know why he bothered her so much. He wasn't disruptive, wasn't rude, just sat there with that quiet presence that felt like a challenge to her carefully ordered world. Nicole, stacking mugs nearby, noticed her tension. "You okay?" she asked under her breath. Carla didn't look up. "Fine, just don't like people treating this place like their personal hideout." Nicole frowned but said nothing, her gaze drifting to Keanu. She still couldn't shake the feeling she knew him from somewhere. The bell jingled again, and a new customer stepped in. A tall man in his late 50s, broad-shouldered with a weathered face and a gray baseball cap pulled low. He carried himself with an easy authority, like someone who'd spent years giving orders without raising his voice. It was Captain Morales, a retired Coast Guard officer who'd become a regular over the years. He nodded at Carla as he approached the counter. "Morning, usual, please?" She forced a tight smile, pouring his black coffee with a splash of cream. "Rough day already?" he asked, catching the edge in her movements. She shrugged. "Just dealing with stragglers." Morales followed her glance to Keanu, raising an eyebrow. "He causing trouble?" Carla hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Not exactly, just won't leave. Been here hours with that weird necklace, acting like he owns the place." Morales took his coffee, turning to look at Keanu more closely. "Doesn't seem like he's bothering anyone." Carla's jaw tightened. "It's not about bothering, it's about respect. This isn't a hotel lobby." Morales sipped his coffee, his expression unreadable, but he didn't argue. He just watched. Carla decided she'd had enough. She grabbed a rag and marched over to Keanu's table, her posture stiff with purpose. "Look," she said, keeping her voice low but firm, "you've got your coffee. If you're not drinking it, I'm going to have to ask you to clear out. We've got other customers who need seats." Keanu looked up, his dark eyes steady. "I'm not taking up space anyone's waiting for," he said, nodding toward the half-empty shop. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not the point. You're lingering, and it's throwing off the vibe." He tilted his head slightly, touching the pendant again. "Is it me or this?" Carla's eyes narrowed. "Doesn't matter. I run this place, and I say when someone's overstayed." "You've been here too long." Her tone was sharp now, cutting through the quiet. A few heads turned, sensing the shift. Nicole hovered near the counter, biting her lip, unsure whether to step in. Keanu didn't rise to the bait. "I'll finish the coffee," he said evenly, "but I'm not here to cause problems." He took a slow sip, his calm unshaken. Carla wasn't satisfied. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "That thing around your neck, What's it even mean? You some kind of hippie? A drifter with a sob story? She didn't know why she pushed, but something about his refusal to explain fueled her frustration. Keanu set the mug down gently. It's from a time I almost didn't make it back, he said, his voice soft but heavy. A boat, a storm, a night I shouldn't have survived. It's not a story for sale. His words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the air. Carla froze, caught off guard again. She hadn't expected that kind of weight, that kind of truth. Before she could respond, Morales stepped over, coffee in hand, his presence a quiet anchor. Everything all right here? He asked, his tone neutral, but firm. Carla straightened, brushing her hands on her apron, just handling a customer who doesn't get the hint. Morales glanced at Keanu, then back at her. Looks to me like he's just drinking his coffee. She bristled. He's been here half the day, Morales. I've got a business to run. Keanu looked up at Morales, then at Carla. I'll go when I'm done, he said, his voice still low. But this, he touched the pendant, stays with me. It's not about you. Carla's face flushed, her control slipping. It's my shop, she snapped. I decide what's about me. Morales raised a hand, his calm cutting through her heat. Let's take a breath. No one's breaking laws here. But Carla didn't back down. She turned to Nicole, who'd edged closer. Get me the phone. I'm calling the owner if he won't move. Nicole hesitated, wide-eyed. Carla, maybe we don't need to. Now, Carla cut her off. The shop went still, the few customers watching openly now. Keanu took another sip, unfazed, but his eyes met Morales's for a moment. The retired captain saw something there. Recognition, maybe, or just understanding. He set his coffee down on a nearby table and stepped between them. Carla, he said quietly, you sure you want to push this? She glared at him, then at Keanu. I'm sure I don't want some guy turning my place into his personal shrine. The tension crackled, a standoff no one had seen coming. Outside, the waves kept rolling, oblivious to the storm brewing within. The coffee shop felt smaller now, the air thick with the weight of unspoken words. The few customers left sat frozen, their eyes darting between Carla, Keanu, and Morales, as if waiting for the next move in a game no one had agreed to play. Keanu leaned back slightly in his chair, the untouched coffee cooling in front of him, the wooden wave pendant resting quietly against his chest. His calm hadn't wavered, but it wasn't passive anymore. It was a presence that filled the room. Carla stood rigid, her hands clenched at her sides, the phone still in Nicole's hesitant grip a few steps away. Morales stayed between them, his steady gaze holding the fragile balance. Nicole finally spoke, her voice soft but urgent. Carla, come on, this isn't worth it. Carla's head snapped toward her. Stay out of this, Nicole. He's testing me, and I'm not letting it slide. She took a step closer to Keanu, her frustration boiling over. You think you can just sit here acting all mysterious with that thing, and I'll just let it go? This is my space, my rules. If you don't like it, leave. Her words echoed, sharp and final, but they didn't land the way she wanted. Keanu didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her, his dark eyes clear and unflinching. I'm not testing you, he said, his tone even but firm. I came here for coffee, not a fight. This, he touched the pendant, isn't about you or your rules. It's about me. Carla opened her mouth to argue, but he kept going, his voice cutting through her anger like a blade through fog. I wore this when I was pulled from the water, half dead, after a storm took everything else. It's not a prop or a statement. It's a piece of what kept me alive. If that bothers you, that's your weight to carry, not mine. The shop went silent, the kind of stillness that presses against your ears. Nicole's eyes widened, the phone slipping slightly in her hands. Morales tilted his head, a flicker of something crossing his face. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Carla stood there, her breath catching, the fire in her chest faltering. She hadn't expected that, hadn't wanted that. His words weren't loud, but they stripped her defenses bare, leaving her exposed in a way she hadn't been in years. The customers watched, a woman in the back setting her book down, a man near the door lowering his phone after recording the exchange. Morales stepped forward, his voice low but steady. Carla, he's not breaking any laws. He's a customer, paid for his coffee twice now. You've got no ground to stand on here. She turned to him, her face flushed. This isn't about laws, Morales. It's about respect. He's sitting there like he owns the place, and I'm supposed to just take it? Morales shook his head. He's sitting there like a man who knows what matters to him. You're the one making it a battle. Carla's hands trembled, not with anger now, but with something deeper. A crack in the wall she'd built around herself. She looked at Keanu, really looked at him, and for the first time saw past the hoodie, the pendant, the quiet. She saw a man who wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending, just existing in a way she'd forgotten how to. Her throat tightened. I don't get it, she said quieter now, almost to herself. Why does it matter so much? Keanu met her gaze, his expression softening. Because it's the one thing I didn't lose when I lost everything else. The weight of that settled over the room. Nicole stepped closer, setting the phone down on a table, her voice barely a whisper. Carla, let it go, please. But Carla didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood there, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a hollow ache she couldn't name. Morales picked up his coffee, glancing at Keanu. You're good here, he said, a nod of quiet solidarity. Then he turned to Carla. You don't have to like it, but you don't have to fix it either. Sometimes people carry what they need to, and that's it. Carla's shoulders slumped, the tension unraveling. She looked at Keanu one last time, then turned and walked back to the counter, her steps slow, unsteady. The shop exhaled, the murmur of voices creeping back in as customers returned to their lives. Keanu stayed where he was, taking a sip of the cold coffee, his pendant catching the light. Nicole lingered nearby, watching him, then whispered to herself, I knew he looked familiar. She didn't mean the movies. She meant something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. A week later, Carla stood alone in the shop after closing, the chairs stacked, the counter wiped clean. In her hand, she held a small wooden pendant, not a wave, but a simple circle, one she'd found in a drawer from years ago, before the rules and the control took over. She hadn't worn it since she started running this place, hadn't thought it mattered. Now she slipped it over her neck, feeling its weight against her chest. She didn't know if it meant survival, or faith, or just memory, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to hide it. Outside, the waves rolled on, steady and endless, carrying their own stories into the night.